What's up guys, my name is Arina and welcome back to my channel where I review everything tech. So guys, in today's video I have these 3 iPhones here, the last year's iPhone XS Max and the new iPhone 11 and the iPhone 11 Pro Max. As it happens every year after the new iPhone models are released, many of you will be wondering if it's worth upgrading. I hope this video will help you decide for yourself which phone to pick, especially if the camera aspect is important for you. So in this video we'll take a look at some daylight photos, night shots, wide-angle shots, selfies, photos taken in challenging light conditions, and much more. And of course, I'll test the side-by-side video quality and stabilization. First, let's take a look at the specs of the cameras on these 3 phones. We have a dual camera on the iPhone XS Max, a triple camera on the iPhone 11 Pro Max, and a dual camera on the iPhone 11. The main difference is that now we have a dedicated ultra-wide camera on the iPhone 11 and the iPhone 11 Pro Max, and also it's important to note that there is no telephoto camera on the iPhone 11. Let's also take a look at the apertures of these cameras, and as you can see, the 11 Pro Max has a larger aperture on its telephoto camera when compared to the XS Max, so I guess we can expect brighter portraits and times to zoom photos from the 11 Pro Max, but we'll see how this translates in the real-world comparison. And by the way, let's start with some portraits. And since the iPhone 11 doesn't have a dedicated telephoto camera and it uses its main lens to take portraits, you have to come closer to the object when you take a photo. And that's why my whole body looks slightly distorted in the photo from the iPhone 11. My head looks small, my arm looks really big and weird, so just keep it in mind when you take a portrait on the iPhone 11 and stay a little bit farther, like for example in the next set of portraits right here. The first thing I noticed about the iPhone 11 Pro Max's portraits, which I personally love, is that my whole body would always be in focus, not just my face. If you look at my blouse and my shorts, you will see that they look a little soft on the shot from the iPhone XS Max, but if you've seen my other videos about the camera on the XS Max, I guess you already know that. Overall, I would say that the photos from the iPhone 11 Pro Max and the iPhone 11 look slightly brighter and more vibrant than the photo from the XS Max. And let's look at the last example in the portrait section, and once again you can see that the photos from the iPhone 11 Pro Max and the iPhone 11 look slightly brighter and more vibrant than the photo from the XS Max, but overall I wouldn't say there is a super dramatic difference between them. And now let's look at some random daylight photos. In this particular example, the iPhone XS Max produces slightly less vibrant and contrasty photo. Also, the shadows look more pronounced in the shots from the 11 Pro Max and the iPhone 11. Next, let's look at the photos taken in more challenging light conditions with the sun shining right into the cameras. The iPhone 11 Pro Max and the iPhone 11 produce very similar photos, and the photo from the XS Max looks slightly different in terms of colors and brightness. A few more daylight shots for you guys. Now let's talk about the selfies. And first, let's see what these iPhones give us in terms of the tech specs. We have 7 megapixels on the front-facing camera of the iPhone XS Max, 12 megapixels on the iPhone 11 Pro Max, and 12 megapixels on the iPhone 11. These 3 cameras have the same apertures of 2.2, and let's see how these numbers translate in the real-world comparison. So let's look at some selfies. I noticed that the skin texture definitely looks more pronounced in the selfies of the iPhone 11 Pro Max and the iPhone 11 when compared to the XS Max, and of course it will be up to your taste and preferences. Now let's look at some portrait selfies, and like I said earlier, if you look at the photo from the XS Max, you will see that everything is blurred in the shot except for my face. I've never been a fan of this effect in the selfie portrait mode of the iPhone XS Max, and I'm glad they fixed it on the new iPhone models. And guys, speaking of selfies, let's look at some wide-angle selfies from the iPhone 11 Pro Max and the iPhone 11. It's really amazing to have this ultra-wide mode for those times when you're trying to fit more people into the frame or for when you're trying to show an interesting background. And moving on to the times to zoom photos. Once again, I would say the iPhone 11 Pro Max and the iPhone 11 produce pretty much identical photos, even though in this particular example the 11 Pro Max used its telephoto camera while the iPhone 11 used its main camera. And of course I had to rely on the digital zoom on the iPhone 11 since it doesn't have a dedicated telephoto camera. And as you can see, the shot from the XS Max looks slightly different in terms of colors, however all of these three devices produced pretty sharp, good quality photos. And one more example of times to zoom photos for you guys. Next, let's look at some wide-angle shots from the iPhone 11 Pro Max and the iPhone 11. So guys, let's look at some photos taken at the golden hour as the sun was going down. My first impression was that these three shots look absolutely identical. However, there is a slight difference. In these three photos, the iPhone 11 Pro Max and the iPhone 11 produce slightly more vibrant and sharper shots, especially if you look at the bottom of these photos. In the next example, you can see that the photo from the XS Max looks a little washed out, while the new iPhones produce more contrasty shots. And of course, it's always up to your preferences, guys, which photo you like best. And here, I guess we have a recurrent pattern in terms of contrast, and I think by this point of the video you guys already noticed that the main cameras and the ultra-wide cameras on the iPhone 11 Pro Max and the iPhone 11 produce almost identical results, which I actually couldn't say about the cameras of the iPhone XR and the iPhone XS Max when I compared them last year. Moving on to the photos taken indoors in the low light conditions. And speaking of the photos taken in the low light conditions, let's see how the iPhone 11 Pro Max and the iPhone 11 will handle the low light wide-angle shots. And of course, the photos look so much darker because of the smaller apertures on the ultra-wide cameras. Now let's move on to the most anticipated part for me, the night shots. As you know, the iPhone 11 Pro Max and the iPhone 11 have the night mode. But first, let's look at these photos taken with the night mode off. The iPhone XS Max here produces the brightest shot, and I would say the sharpest one between these three. And honestly, looking at these photos, the first thing that comes to mind is, did they really improve the cameras? But now, let's look at the photos taken with the night mode enabled on the iPhone 11 and the 11 Pro Max. And look at this transformation! This is actually amazing how the new cameras managed to produce such bright and vibrant photos without losing in quality. You can see that these shots look pretty crisp despite the fact that they were taken in the pretty low light conditions. Next, let's look at the photos taken in the very low light conditions. These photos were taken in default mode, and you can see that the XS Max once again produces a slightly brighter photo than the other two. And now let's look at the photos taken with the night mode enabled on the iPhone 11 and the 11 Pro Max. Once again we get really bright and vibrant photos. Unsurprisingly, the longer shutter speed of the night mode has helped to virtually eliminate the graininess and noise in the shots from the iPhone 11 and the 11 Pro Max. A few more night mode examples for you guys, so you can see for yourself how these three iPhones compare. Now let's switch gears and see how these three iPhones compare when it comes to videos. All the videos in this comparison were shot handheld, and you can see some slight difference in colors, especially if you look at the sand on the beach. The next three videos look almost identical to me. A few more video examples for you guys. Now let's look at the videos taken in the dusk. And here are some videos taken indoors in the low light conditions. Next, let's test the stabilization. These 4K videos were shot at 30 frames per second. And the next 4K videos were shot at 60 frames per second. And as you can see, the improvement in stabilization on the cameras of the iPhone 11 and 11 Pro Max is dramatic. And also, I did a night stabilization test for you guys, so now you can see these three videos in very poor quality, since it was really dark. The one from the XS Max is so dark that you can barely see anything in there, and the iPhone 11 and the 11 Pro Max produce much brighter videos. So guys, these are all the photos and videos I got to show you today. When it comes to camera improvements between the iPhone XS Max and the iPhone 11 Pro Max, I would say there are three main improvements for me. The first one is the portrait mode. I like that the whole object is in focus now. The second one is the night mode. It's a very good feature to have, and I like how my night photos come out when I use it. And the third one is definitely the stabilization of the 4K videos at 60 frames per second. And of course, I cannot praise enough the decision to add the ultra-wide camera, which lets you be more creative in your photography. But having mentioned the improvements, I still think that when it comes to random daylight photos, selfies and static videos, I honestly wouldn't say there is a dramatic difference between these three iPhones. When it comes to the photos from the cameras on the iPhone 11, as I've previously said, they seemed very similar to the pictures coming from the iPhone 11 Pro Max. And going back to the question if it's worth upgrading, I guess by this point of the video you already know the answer. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys, and see you in the next one!